Hey there, Full Live Athlete Pastor Channel. This is the online Bible reading club. Justin speaking. We're on day 95, which is going to be 1 Samuel 1 through 3 and Luke chapter 8, 26 through 56. So let's get to it. The reading today, if you think about a theme, the theme is going to be how can you have the presence of God with you and still be experiencing profound suffering and a disconnect between what seems to be the clear presence of God and a lack of blessings. Okay, so let's think through those issues as we look at it. So as you look at 1 Samuel, we're starting a new book. We finished Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and now Samuel. And this is a new phase in the history of God's people in the Old Covenant, is that God's sending prophets. Now, the idea of prophets, Abraham's called a prophet. Moses was the quintessential prophet in the Old Testament. And Deuteronomy 18 says that there's going to be a prophet come after Moses, one like him. So maybe this is Christ. We're thinking Samuel's going to be this guy. Maybe he's Christ. The people originally experiencing this don't know. Maybe this is the one who will make the way of salvation truly known to the people. Well, they feel like they're in a good position right here because they've got the tent of meeting in Shiloh, and that was explained in Exodus 24 through 40 of what the tent of meeting is. It's where God would meet with His people. He would speak to Aaron, He'd speak to Moses, the priest there, Aaron, and explain things, to the people and lay out His demands. Well, this was associated with blessings. Now, right there at the edge of the temple, though, or the tent of meeting, is Hannah. And we're introduced to Hannah. And Hannah's going to be the mother of Samuel, the prophet, the first prophet here that we're going to see. And that's what the book is named after, Samuel. Well, we see that one of the key things about the blessedness of being in the presence of God, is childbearing, having children. Now, you think about Abraham and also Isaac, their wives, the first two of Israel, first two forefathers. Abraham's wife Sarah, barren her whole life. Isaac married Rebekah. She was also barren for 20 some odd years before each of those women had children. And you think about that. That is disconcerting because childlessness was equated with the curse. You see, once God was ready to move and demonstrate His authority over all the kings of the earth and over all the nations, and His assertion of His reclamation of creation through Moses' time. What happened in Exodus 1 was that the people of Israel multiplied so greatly that they were a threat to Pharaoh, which instituted this whole tension, which led to the ultimate triumph over Pharaoh as he tried to oppress them. He tried to have their babies murdered, by the midwives and things like that. So you think about this, the blessing of God, His presence was associated with fruitfulness of the womb, and childlessness was always viewed as a curse. Well, here we've got the mother of Samuel. Spoiler alert, she's a mother, but she's in this situation, Hannah is childless. And she prays to the Lord. It says there she poured out her soul to the Lord in verse 15, chapter 1. She goes above and beyond, praying and giving God her full devotion and dependence on Him. She wasn't able to bear a child, so her husband took another wife. And this is a big source of consternation for her, obviously, because the other wife is talking trash about how the Lord closed her womb, and it's just extremely humiliating. So she prays, and eventually the Lord gives her Samuel, and Samuel is going to be, through the suffering that Hannah's endured and her husband have endured through this time, it's going to lead her to greater devotion, which is going to be key for this prophet Samuel to grow up and to be set apart to the Lord and called to be a prophet. And this is how it always works. God brings us out of suffering and these things that are purposeful, actually, for blessings that are going to come ultimately. And isn't that the way with Christ, is that Christ is going to go through death in order to bring about resurrection for us. He's going to enter into the sufferings and death, even to bring us out of it. And we're going to go with Him through that. That's how it's going to go. Well, you see, Hannah experiences this great deliverance from God and then devotes Samuel to the Lord at the end of chapter 1. And then you see chapter 2 is largely a song or a poem where Hannah is expressing the joy of the Lord in her redemption and seeing God answer her request. So what we also see is a contrast between the righteous and the unrighteous in chapter 2, or the two humanities. We talk about the two humanities repeatedly through Genesis 3:15, that there's a seed of the serpent, or offspring of the serpent, and offspring of the woman, and they're in mortal combat throughout history. And you see that Eli, the priest, had these worthless sons. That's what they're actually called, worthless sons. And they actually will just be known for having sex with all the women that are near the tent of meeting there. They are absolutely horrible. Meanwhile, the contrast is that the young man Samuel, in verse 26, continued to grow both in stature and favor with the Lord and also with man. And that's interesting because those same words are used to describe Christ in Luke chapter 2. So you think about it, you have a clear picture of the offspring of the woman, a type in Samuel. And really the key of Samuel is we're going to be driving toward King David, who is the man after God's own heart, who is a type of Christ. And we've seen the allusions to that at the end of Ruth in yesterday's video. But as you see it, the Lord is going to reject Eli's household. And you know who's going to deliver the news? Samuel. Samuel's going to set up the rejection of the wicked priest, and he's going to do so through this called prophet. And that's what the prophets are going to do. They're going to be covenant administrators or legislators. They're going to bring the covenant down, what God's called us to do, upon the people of God, and they're going to call them to account. And the priests did not measure up to the standard. They're to be Christ-like, and they have failed in that, and they have, rather than serving God and his people, they're taking from, and they're abusing the people of God, as we mentioned earlier. So you think of this, that the prophets are going to bring the people to account for their sins. And that's what the blessing of God is that he does send prophets, as he's going to send a prophet to David to call him to repentance. God, through his word, and we hear it preached, we saw men would bring it to these people in the Old Testament, but God graciously, by his presence with us, gives us the word to bring us back as a discipline for us. And you see that's how he related to his people, Israel, as well. And you see that's kind of the theme of prophecy. That's what it is. It's not so much about telling the future, but about bringing about conformity to and demonstrating God's love to his people, conformity to his word, his standard, and his design. So that's what prophecy is all about. We're going to see that unfold as we read through the scriptures. But let's get to the New Testament now. We'll go over to Luke and see. We saw the problem of barrenness in Samuel at the beginning with Hannah, but now we see Jesus is dealing with a man in 8:28 or 8:26 and down to 39. A man who is absolutely out of his mind. He is consumed by a legion of demons, and they recognize Christ, and they want to flee from him, and they're afraid of him, and they understand that he has absolute mastery as the Son of God over them, and they plead with him to not send them into the abyss or some kind of watery grave, a place where they will be confined. So they say, send us into this herd of pigs. And Jesus commands them to go into the pigs. And what do these demons do? But they take the pigs and run them down into the water to drown them all. A massive herd of pigs. There's pig herders. There are not many, but several of them that are supervising this activity of caring for the pig herds, and they go back to the town to tell what's going on here. This man is notorious. He is known to be out of his mind, naked, hurting himself, breaking chains. He is a menace to society. And then when the townspeople get there, they see that Jesus is sitting with this man and who is in his right mind and finally clothed and And this man just wants to be with Jesus, even says, hey, let me go with you. And then Jesus says, no. You go back to your town and tell them what I've done for you. And that's a real important point for us in numerous ways. There are a couple things here. Is that this man suffered in order to be able to tell a story. To get down to the end of it, we're not the center of our world ultimately. Our personal comfort is not the center of our existence. The point of our existence is to dwell with God and tell His story and to bring glory to Him. And that's you may not like that, and I at first didn't like that, but I am seeing that is the purpose of my life and the purpose of all of our lives, and we can run from that or we can embrace it. So there's only two ways to live life, is to be focused on yourself or focused on God. And we want to be God-centered because that sets us up for doxological fitness, to do what we're made to do and to enjoy it, which is to glorify God. So as you think about this, Jesus is going to heal and raise a dead girl. He's going to heal this sick woman who has this bleeding problem, and all these things. Jesus is touching the cursed. Jesus is touching the unclean. He's making them whole. He's making them clean. And that's exactly what He's going to do in the gospel. He's going to ultimately bring us into the presence of God and all the blessings. And the presence of God for us is going to include suffering, as it did for Christ, but ultimately He's leading us out of uncleanness, out of unwholeness, and into peace with Him and each other. And this is the great blessing of the gospel. He's bringing us out of our sin and out of death through His own death and resurrection, and that we will experience a resurrection with Him in a new heaven and a new earth. So this is the blessings of the gospel. I hope that's helpful to you. Tomorrow we'll keep on going through each and every day, reading the scriptures, but understand, how do you explain the presence of God with you, with the suffering that you endure? Well, we live in a God-centered world and not a me-centered world. That these things do have purpose is good news, and they're ultimately for our good and for God's glory. And we can trust Him, and we can pour out our souls and our hearts to God and pray and plead with Him, and He answers. All right, with that said, if you're watching to the end, like the video, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and we'll see you next time on the Online Bible Reading Club. Peace.